would you please read this one?
Sure. This is again in the book of Matthew, chapter 24. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines, pestilences.
Notice this. Here it says that there will be pestilences. Okay, so we have false prophets, we have a false Christ. Then you have wars and rumors of wars. Then you have famines and pestilence. Now, why is that relevant that we see Matthew 24 as one of the signs of the times we have pestilences?
Yeah, literally that word means contagious diseases. So if you just look it up in a Bible concordance, you'll see that word pestilence literally translated is contagious diseases.
And so when people ask about COVID-19, is it in Bible prophecy? I would say yes, in a very general way, but not specifically as a crisis that Jesus specifically predicted, but just under pestilences. Is that correct, Josh?
That's correct.
And notice what it says next.
There'll be earthquakes in diverse places, and all these things are the beginning of sorrow.
So I want you to notice this. Please pay close attention that as many people are saying COVID-19 is the mark of the beast, COVID-19 is one of the 7 last plagues, Jesus here says, look, the end is not yet here. And then he says, this is just the beginning of sorrows. In other words, this is just the beginning of something worse that will come. So here's a review. Jesus says, here's the order in the chronology, that it would be false Christ, that there would be wars and rumors of wars, that there would be famines, pestilence, and earthquakes in several places. And all of this would just be the. Now, I want you to notice something. We're going to go back to Matthew 24, 7 and 8. And we're going to see something very important.
So I want to talk a little bit, Daniel, about this beginning of sorrows that it talks about here in the scriptures. And let's look at this in the original language. You can see here, this is what it would be literally in the Greek on your screen. Odin is, I believe, how it's pronounced. And it literally means a childbirth pain. Okay, so for those mothers that are out there that have given birth to children, you know that when the birth pains start, they start slow, the contractions start slow, and then they decrease in distances, and they increase in severity. So Jesus is saying is that when these are the beginnings of sorrows, that he's saying things are going to come more rapidly, and they're going to be with deepening intensity.
Okay, so here you have, we're talking specifically about crises, right?
That's correct.
And so what Josh is pointing out, that if you look at the Greek word, in the original, it says the beginning of birth pains. And when you look at this word, it means that there would be more calamities, more wars, more pestilence, more famines. And what's going to happen is that they're going to come quicker and they're going to be more severe. Is that right?
That's correct.
Into the full birth of a baby.
That's right.
In other words, we are waiting for something, right?
And that full birth is Jesus Christ coming in the clouds of heaven.
And so here, as you have this, we want to point this out, because when you look at this, when many people are saying that COVID-19 is the end of the world, Jesus says this is just a birth pain. Because there's things that will happen, more things will happen. Now, I want to point out to the spirit of prophecy in regards to this, because many people are saying that maybe this is just stretching it a little bit too much when it comes to birth pains. But notice that she uses the same descriptions in Great Controversy, 589, paragraph 3. She says, these visitations are to become more and more frequent and more disastrous. And that's exactly what Joshua was saying when it comes to the birth pains or contractions, that they become more and more closely together.
That's right. Quicker succession.
In quicker succession, and they become more disastrous. And so what I want to suggest to those watching is that when it comes to COVID-19 and when it comes to these prophecies, is that COVID-19 is just a birth pain, and that this is not the end, but it's the beginning of the end, that we will have more pestilence, we will have more diseases, more things like COVID-19 that are going to happen. And as a matter of fact, it would be more disastrous. Now, let's look at this from Patriarchs and Prophets and Kings.
All right, the quote is, in quick succession, the judgments of God will follow one another, fire, flood, earthquake with war and bloodshed.
So here you have it again. She says, in quick succession. In other words, one right after another. Here you have them, and then they will come and intensify war. Now you'll see why this is important. Notice what she says in Sermon Talks. In Sermon Talks, now this is her preaching, Sermon and Talks, and this is what she said in her sermon. As these very things will increase until the close of this earth's history. Now, why is that important? The reason why this is important, it's because many people are waiting for one event, they're waiting for one specific thing to set off the Sunday law, one specific thing to run to the mountains, one specific thing for probation to close. But when you look and you study Matthew 24, Luke 21, and when you look at the spirit of prophecy, that's not what it says. It says that there will be many natural disasters, there will be many pestilences, there will be many earthquakes, and many wars and rumors of war, all the way until the end of this earth's history. So for those people that are pointing to one specific event, it's something that can really lead you to being deceived. I saw a year ago, a man that was presenting in April 2018 or 19 that probation was about to close. And he had these events on why probation was going to close. And you know what? If you believe that, you might think, hey, my case is closed. I'm still in sin. I haven't repented. And many people might just throw off their faith saying, I'm lost. And so we have to be careful that we do not put too much emphasis on one single event or one single signs of the time.
Amen. All right, this is from 9th volume of the Testimonies, page 11. And this whole quote is really good. The calamities by land and sea, the unsettled state of society, the alarms of war are portentous. They forecast approaching events of the greatest magnitude. Great changes are soon to take place in our world, and the final movements will be rapid ones.
I think that this is very interesting, Josh. If you look at this right here, it says they forecast. In other words, these signs of the time, these pestilence, these wars and rumors of wars, these famines, these false Christ, all these things are just a forecast.
That's right.
In other words, these are just things that tell us of something that will come. It says events of greatest magnitude. Now, if you've been listening to our presentations on our previous series, one thing that we learned is that coronavirus is not one of the biggest pestilence that we've seen, right?
That's right.
From history, there was an even bigger pestilence. What pestilence was that?
Yeah, we studied 2 presentations ago about the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, which was the mortality rate was much higher than the COVID-19 mortality rate.
Right, and within a few days, 6 days, there was over how many deaths? I think it was over 6,000 deaths, right?
I know at the end it was well over, they were saying that over 50 million people died from the Spanish flu pandemic.
And that's a conservative estimate,
Right.
Is that correct?
They're estimating that it's more than that.
And so what I'm saying is that we should be careful on how much weight we put on one crisis. Because when you see Jesus, there's several things that are happening, and all those things are just a forecast of things that are going to be coming of the greatest multitude. And notice once again, there would be rapid ones that will continue to increase as time goes by. Now, I want you to know why this is. Now, this is very important. We're going to see how Satan is working and why these things are happening and what the enemy is doing, because many people are tempted to think God is doing this. You know, my uncle was he was a general contractor. He would make buildings, and I would work with him often at the time. And I remember that he would make me write up contracts on the computer. And when we would write up contracts on the computer, he would place and he would say, make sure that it says that we are not responsible for the acts of God. Now, this is what you put in a United States contract when you're making a building. In other words, what are things that are considered acts of God?
Yeah, they would just, any natural disaster could be a hailstorm or a tornado or a hurricane,
a flood.
All these things are referred to by the insurance industry as acts of God.
And so when you put that, many people blame these things on Jesus or on God, on the Lord. But in Matthew chapter 13, you have Jesus, and he gives a parable where a sower goes out and begins to plant. And as he plants, he says that within a few days, his workers come, and then they see that there's tares. And then they ask him, Lord, didn't you just plant good seed in this world? And the response of the sower, or of Jesus, says, an enemy has done this. In other words, when it comes to calamity, when it comes to destruction, when it comes to pestilence, when it comes to anything that has to do with death or destruction, Jesus does not take the blame, but he says an enemy has done this. Now, notice this from Second Selected Messages, page 52. Notice what she says. Satan is working in the atmosphere. He is poisoning the atmosphere. Now, notice what he is doing. He imparts to the air a deadly taint, and thousands perish by the pestilence. So when you look at this here, you can say, well, COVID-19, we don't have a specific prophecy about COVID-19, but COVID-19 is in prophecy in a sense, in a general way, where it's one of the pestilence, one of the child contractions, or one of the birth contractions or birth pains. And here, Ms. White is clearly saying that Satan contaminates the atmosphere, and he also puts a deadly taint in the air, and many people perish because of this pestilence. Now, notice what it says, he, referring to Satan, he will bring disease and disaster into populous cities are reduced to ruins and desolation. And notice what she continues to say, even now he is at work in accidents and calamities by sea, by land, in great conflagrations. Now, I want you to notice is that she does not say God is doing this. She says, Satan is doing this. Now, we're going to be, I was just in Australia, and I've been there for a bit. And I was talking to Joshua how in Australia, one of the things that they had, as you can see, they had a fire. They had huge fires. I think everybody heard about that. California, before that, had fires. And right after those fires, they had flooding. And I thought that was amazing. And now we have COVID-19. It just seems like you have the fires, then you have the flooding. After the flooding, you have COVID-19. So you can see that these things are beginning to increase. And it's not only here, but it's also in the US.
That's right.
Right now, COVID-19, you have it. It's epidemic all over the world. I just saw on the news that there's been tornadoes hitting in the US, specifically in the South. We have one in Arkansas. And so it just seems like before they can even recover from one disaster, another one comes and another one comes. And this is prophesied. Notice this.
All right. It goes on and says, in fierce tornadoes and terrific hailstorms and tempests, floods, cyclones, tidal waves and earthquakes, in every place and in 1,000 forms, Satan is exercising his power.
So once again, it is Satan who is exercising his powers to do these things. In other words, Jesus says, just because Jesus said these are signs of the time, these are evidences, it does not mean that Jesus is doing this. But here you have clear indication that it is Satan who's contaminating the air, the atmosphere, who's causing all these disasters. And it says in 1,000 forms, and he is exercising his power. Now notice what it says. God has not restrained the powers of darkness from carrying forward their deadly work of vitiating the air with a deadly miasma, but man suffers from pestilence. So here you have again where Satan is contaminating this earth and men are dying from pestilence. It says, but faint representations of what will be in the near future. So all of these things that we're seeing, these are but faint. In other words, faint is just a small, a little picture of what will be in the near future. So when we're talking about the end, we must make sure that we put every signs of the time in its proper bearing. We don't want to magnify it and make it so big to say the end is here. And also we don't want to minimize it to make it seem like it's not that important. But we want to give every portion of prophecy its proper bearing. Okay.
All right, the quote here, third selected messages, 391. God has not restrained the powers of darkness from carrying forward their deadly work. These things are the result of drops from the vials of God's wrath being sprinkled on the earth.
Now, I think that this is interesting, Josh, because when you look at that, someone might be asking, wait, I thought these are the judgments of God. And yes, that's true that these are the judgments of God. She clearly says that these are but drops, little drops from the vial of God's wrath. So I want you to notice this. When you look at this, God has not restrained the powers of darkness. And then she says that these are the powers of Satan. So how is that God passes judgment upon the world? How is that these are the vials of God's wrath? Simply spoken, is that God has been protecting the world from destruction. And as he allows Satan, he begins to remove his protection from the world. And as he does that, Satan is now able to go and attack destruction in the world.
It reminds me, Daniel, of Revelation, how it says that the angels are holding back the winds of strife in Revelation 7. So as those angels are holding back the strife, if God allows those angels to let go, then the demonic agencies will be at work causing all kinds of destruction.
That's exactly right. And so the way that God passes judgment is by allowing Satan to cause destruction, and he does not hold him back. So God is giving up these people to their own destruction. Now, I want you to see this because I want you to see this. Why is Satan doing this? What is his plan? What is his master plan with causing all of these destruction, these natural disasters? Why is it that he's doing them rapidly and so frequently with greater magnitude? In other words, with more intensity. There's a satanic plan behind this, and I want you to see it, what it is. Now, this is what it says in Great Controversy.
589.2, it says, Satan works through the elements also to garner his harvest of unprepared souls. He studied the secrets of the laboratories of nature, and he uses all of his power to control the elements as far as God allows. He will bring trouble upon others and lead men to believe that it is God who is afflicting them.
It is his object to entice the nations to war against one another. Now we're going to do a quick review. We're looking, what is Satan's plan? In other words, what does Satan have and why is he doing this? What is his satanic plan for these end times? It says, for he can thus divert the minds of the people from the work of preparation to stand in the day of God. Now notice this. So I did a quick review for those that might have just joined. So we were talking about signs of the times, how COVID-19 fits in end time prophecy. And what we're looking at here is that Satan has a plan of why he's doing these. He will be making them more rapid and more successive with greater magnitude. And so from the quotes that we read, we have three purposes of why Satan is doing this. So number one,
harvest unready souls.
So Satan, with these things, let's say tsunamis and earthquakes and pestilences, one of his plans is to kill people that are not right with God. In other words, people that are not ready to see Jesus.
That's right. Number 2 says, lead people to think that God is responsible for these things.
So number 2 is exactly what we just covered, that it is not God, but an enemy is doing this, and he wants to make people to think God is causing this suffering. God is punishing these people. Number 3,
distract people to be left unprepared.
Now, here's something that I want to spend a little bit of time as we go into this, we dive into this. That notice what it says. Distract. Here it is. We're going back. It says notice this. He entices, or his object is to entice the nations to war against one another. So he is the instigator between two nations. Why? For he can thus divert the minds of the people from the work of preparation to stand in the day of God. Now, this is exactly why we're doing this, because many people take one signs of the time and then they put all of their energy into studying it and emphasizing it and saying the end is here, and they have all of their attention and they don't realize that it's simply a distraction from Satan. Now, if we were to listen to what Jesus would said in Matthew 24, he says, do not be troubled, for the end is not yet, or the end is not by and by, then we would put all of these signs of the time in its proper bearing. I have a friend that called me from Los Angeles, and he says, Daniel, I've never heard you preach about, prophecy, it's end time, and how soon Jesus is coming, and how all these things fit in. And I said, that's right. Because most people that preach like that, I'm not saying all, and I'm not saying that it's bad. Most people that do that, a lot of them, they work people up with a passion. They're always looking at what the Pope is saying, what the Pope is writing, what the Pope is doing, and they take their eyes off of Jesus. And many times, it's just a distraction. And that sign or that pestilence will pass, and that's it. And then the next thing will come, an earthquake will come, and they'll say, look, this is the end. And again, and it just gets people agitated, but they're not even preparing. And so I'd rather spend my time preparing, searching my heart, trying to perfect character, and put everything in its right bearing, instead of focusing on the Pope and what he's doing, and be unprepared for that day.
Amen.
So I want to focus on number 2, though, because we want to see Satan's master plan. How does all of this, how does these pestilence, how does these wars, these rumors of wars, these fires, as Ms. White says, how does this fit into end time prophecies besides just being signs of the times? Now, we saw that Satan wants to make sure that as these things begin to happen, he wants to make sure that people have in mind that God is causing this. But if we study the Bible, we will see very clear that it is not God, but Satan. Now, notice what it says. Here is Satan's demonic scheme, his plan.
This is from 10th Manuscript Release 239. Satan puts his interpretation upon events, and they think, as he would have them, that the calamities which fill the land are a result of Sunday breaking.
So this is a fascinating quote. Satan himself is putting interpretations upon the events that are going on today. In other words, you can be preaching God's word, Matthew 24, Luke 21, Revelation, the signs of the time, and you can be preaching Satan's interpretation of these events. And notice what it says. And they think as he would have them. So many people are running around preaching about signs of the times, the end, and they have the interpretation and thinking the thoughts that Satan would have them to think. Notice this, that the calamities which fill the land are a result of Sunday breaking. So Satan wants people to think that God is causing all of these things, these end time events. Jesus is doing this. That's what Satan wants you to think. And then people will come to the conclusion, because we're not keeping Sunday holy. Now, notice the next step.
Thinking to appease the wrath of God, these influential men make laws enforcing Sunday observance.
So I want you to pay close attention to this. It is that Satan has a plan. As you begin to focus and zoom in on these things, if you do not take the interpretation of the Bible, but of the world and of tradition, you begin to think God is causing all these things because we're not keeping a specific day holy, specifically Sunday, and this would lead, Satan wants people, this would lead men of influence to say, hey, we have to get back to keeping this day holy, and we have to make some laws that enforce Sunday observance. I think that this is interesting because I have so many family members and friends in different parts of the world that, that I love dearly. But as soon as these things started happening, some of them are crying. Some of them are scared. Some of them want to go to church and say, we can't even go to church now when we want to go to church. They think the end is here. And they're saying, how do we go back to God? So Satan is wise. He says, look, I just have to cause enough of these catastrophes. People begin to think about God and think, why are these things happening? God is mad. God is upset, and then man will help them and say, hey, we should get back to worshiping God on Sunday. And so Satan has all these set up. Notice the next quote. Notice what it says. This very class put forth the claim that the fast-spreading corruption is largely attributable to the desecration of so-called Christian Sabbath. For those that don't know what the Christian Sabbath is Sunday keeping. And so here you have men of influence that would begin to speak and say, hey guys, something is happening. You know, we have scientists, we have people that are looking at the weather patterns. I just saw on the Jakarta Post, if I'm not mistaken, and on CNN, if I'm not mistaken, that the world right now has the largest hole in the ozone layer that they've ever seen. So you have COVID-19, you have tornadoes, you have fires, you have floods, and now you have a huge hole in the ozone layer, and they're saying, it's okay. We're having economic crises. And people are saying, hey, we don't even know. I had someone call me, one of my family members says, I don't think the world will ever be the same again. You're saying something is happening. You have to get back to God. I saw an interview with Donald Trump, and they were asking them, they're saying, because this last Sunday was Easter, right? And so you have Christians all over the world. And this lady on the news, Fox News, she said, this is a time to get ready, to reconsecrate ourselves to God, to repent of our sins, to come closer to God, as she's having an interview with Donald Trump. And so, at least from what I see happening, I see that everything is falling in line exactly with what Satan wants, that this is just, COVID-19 is just a sign of the time. It's just something that Satan is using, a little tool. It's something small compared to what's going to happen. So I'm not saying that COVID-19, please, this is. I want you to be clear on this. I'm not saying that COVID-19 is going to bring the Sunday law. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that all of these natural disasters, these wars, these rumors of war, as they continue to happen and grow in intensity, would make people continue to think in God, saying, look, these are the judgments of God, not one specific thing, but several of them that come in succession, and they say we have to go back to worshiping God, and they will introduce Sunday worship. Okay. And that the enforcement of the Sunday observance would greatly improve the morals of society. This claim is especially urged in America. Now, I want you to notice this. Why do I want to bring up this quote? Now, this is Great Controversy 587. The reason why I'm saying this is because I keep on hearing people, in Germany, the Sunday law is already happening. Oh, they're putting chips in people's, hands already. But notice with prophecy, if you study Revelation 13, the beast that will be pioneering or pushing forward, especially the Sunday observance, is America. It's not Brazil, it's not Germany, it's not Europe. But many Seventh-day Adventists are deceived, thinking, oh, a chip. Oh, they're looking at Europe. Oh, they're looking at all these things. But very clearly, Revelation 13 says it will be the United States. Great Controversy says the same thing. It will be urged, especially in America. And it says that they will wander after the beast. So we have to be careful when we look at news, when we look at these signs of the times, that we give it its proper bearing.
This is from 5th volume of the Testimonies, page 464. The time is not far distant. The assumption of power on the part of our nation, talking about America, in the decree enforcing the papal Sabbath, talking about Sunday, will be a warning to us.
Now, please pay close attention to this, because just as Satan has a plan, God also has a plan. In other words, just as Satan is doing these things, God also has a plan on what we should be doing. So let's look at that plan. So we're looking at this, that not in the far distant, it says, in our nation, America, the decree of enforcing the Sabbath will be a warning to us. Now, here you have the plan of Satan, right? What he's trying to do, he's trying to agitate all of these all of these catastrophe rumors of wars, famines, pestilences, so that people would think that the judgments of God are falling because we're not keeping a specific day holy. They introduce it, but now notice what it says. She says that God has a plan, that these will be a warning to us, right?
That's right. It will then be time to leave the large cities, preparatory to leaving the smaller ones, for retired homes and secluded places among the mountains.
So, Josh, why don't you tell us a little bit more about this? I know that you've been doing country living for some time. I did mention that Joshua is living actually on a large land all by himself. He was telling me today, his wife, myself, him, and our ministry were sitting down and we were eating, and they were talking about their neighbors. And it was just funny, our neighbor's this and our neighbor's that. And I asked him, I asked his wife, I said, Emily, how far is your neighbor? She said, oh, just a little bit under 2 miles. That's almost 5 kilometers. He said their neighbor is 5 kilometers. And so they live on a large piece of land in the United States. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about this and how you understand this and why this is important, that it would be a warning to us, so on and so forth.
Sure. If we had time to read this whole quote, and it talks about it in Great Controversy as well, that when we see America instituting Sunday laws, it's a sign to God's true followers that it's time to get out of the cities. Now, here's the thing. We shouldn't wait until that time to get out of the cities. It actually tells us that, and we have some of these quotes as we go through this presentation. Mm-hmm. First of all, leave the large cities. All right. I don't know if you've been noticing this with the COVID-19, but it's really the large cities that have been mostly impacted by this. It's not that rural people aren't getting it, but the fact that rural people are getting it less is very true. So leave the large cities. You want to say something about that, Daniel?
I do want to say something. I want to share something about today. So we were living out in the country. We're on, I think, about 1 or 2 hectares of land in our ministry. And so people keep on asking us, how are these things going? And so today we decided to come into the city to give this presentation. And as we were leaving our place, everything is normal. We do shopping, we do farming, we do all these things, our regular schedule, our classes, our trainings, right? And so we go in and we went into Ace Hardware. We went into a store and we saw someone, we saw one of our friends, our very close friends, and she ran to us and told us that many people were complaining about us, that we're not wearing our mask and what are we doing? And unbeknown to us, that in the city now, it is being suggested that every person should be wearing a mask. And as we're driving around, everything is closed, and it's so different to the people in the countryside where we're living. The stores are open, the people are, are sharing we're growing our crops. It's like we're supposed to be quarantined, but we're going back and forth running our daily duties. But when we went into the city, everything was shut down, right?
That's right. So it says here that we should leave the large cities preparatory to leaving the smaller ones. So I want you to notice there's a sequence here. First, we need to leave the major cities of the whole world. It doesn't talk about just the US. And we should head to the smaller towns. Even in the smaller towns and the villages, you're going to have a lot more freedom and a lot better health than you are in the large cities. And then before Jesus comes again, we will be moved by God to head for retired places, secluded places among the mountains to live previous to Jesus' second coming.
So what you're saying is not this, is that I've seen this, and I've seen friends do this and people preach this, that they see the Pope do something, the Pope can just sneeze, go, achoo, and oh no, the Sunday law is coming, and so they go and hide in the mountains.
Yeah, that's not at all what the Lord wants for us. Wants us to be wise, and we're going to look at some more quotes on this. We should take our families, if we're in a large city, move to at least a smaller town, a smaller village, where you have more freedom, more healthy environment, better environment for the children, etc. And there to live as a family and continue to share the Lord and be focused on family life, but also be focused on a ministry as well.
So this is not being isolated, secluded by no one.
No.
So right now, God's people should leave the cities. I know we should be living in the country, And then when we hear the Sunday law coming, then when we leave these large cities, this is just a preparation.
Right.
A preparation so that we can leave the small towns, the small cities, when the Sunday law comes. Is that correct?
That's right.
All right, let's look at the next quote. It says, again and again, the Lord has instructed that our people are to take their families away from the cities into the country, where they can raise their own provision. Now, this is something interesting here, because I know that in the book of Isaiah, there's promises from God. And I know that I've heard this many times, that God at the end times, God will be able to supply for all of our needs, that God will be able to provide for us. So we're going to look at this right now. But here it says that we should leave out of the city. It's a preparation. We're going to move into the small towns, still in the country, as a preparation, and we'll raise our own food. Now, I often wonder about this, Josh. Why do we have to provide for our own food if God is going to miraculously provide for us?
Yeah, I believe that's because a lot of people have a misunderstanding of the sequence of things. She goes on and says, for in the future, the problem of buying and selling will be a very serious one. Now, Daniel was already referring to Revelation chapter 13. In Revelation chapter 13, it's very clear that there will be a mark of the beast crisis, and people will be forced to either receive the mark of the beast, or they won't be able to buy or sell. So she's telling us it's better now, in preparation for the Lord's coming, get out in the country, be in a better environment, safer environment, healthier environment, start learning how to raise your own food now, so that when the time comes that you cannot buy or sell, you will not be caught off guard, because you'll be able to grow your own food. Because the time where the angels will feed us is actually after the Sunday laws are in place, after we've fled to the mountains where there's no opportunity for growing food. It's at that point that the angels will feed us. And that's actually a quote I'd like to share, just from Isaiah 33:16. It says, he, talking about God's people, shall dwell on high. His place of defense shall be the munitions of rocks. Bread shall be given him, his waters shall be sure. This will happen, but it's not going to happen until after the Sunday laws are in place. But before that, there's going to be a time of trouble where we are going to be having to rely upon God, but also be raising our own provisions.
Okay, so for those that might have not understood or are not so familiar with prophecy and the sequence, I'm going to give you a quick review. So what Joshua is saying is that right now, God's people should be moving from the large cities. A really quick note before I move on. We saw a map of the United States, and they had red zones or hot areas where COVID-19 is just running rampant. One of them is New York, by the way. It's a large city. You have Chicago, another large city. You have Los Angeles. But when you look in the United States, like Arkansas, you see all of these places where there's just a bunch of countryside, a lot of forests. Arkansas is called a natural state. I'm not saying that there's no COVID-19, but it's so minimal. So God is telling us, get out of the cities. Why? He's telling us, get out of the cities so that you can prepare. So you will be able to prepare so that when you have to leave those small towns into the mountains. So you have a sequence. You leave the large cities. When you leave the large cities, you go to small ones. And as you're there, you're learning how to grow your own food. During this time, Sunday laws will pass, but there'll be just like a slap on the hand if you do not keep Sunday holy. They'll start with fines. It'll increase to imprisonment. They'll go up in intensity until finally there will be, if you do not keep Sunday holy, there will be a national Sunday law and a death decree that you will die if you do not keep Sunday holy. At that time, you will leave and flee to the mountains. And when you flee to the mountains, that's when God will provide for your bread and for your water. Is that correct?
That's correct, Daniel. Amen.
The angels will come and deliver this to you. But when these Sundays law come to pass, and it's just fines, and it's just simply imprisonment, God will not miraculously provide for you. You should be doing that now, learning how to grow your own food. But when that time comes, you can already be in the country, and you should be growing your own food. So right now, it's a time to prepare, and many people are not aware of that. They think that all of this is going to be a miracle. So two different cases. One we call Jacob's little time of trouble. When the death decree comes, Jacob's big time of trouble.
And Daniel, I just want to put in a little plug right here. I really recommend, if you want to learn more about this subject, read the book Last Day Events. It just has nice sequence. It gives you an idea of the timelines and everything. And it just helps you to see the panoramic view of what will happen before Jesus comes.
Amen. Amen. Okay, moving on to the next one. We had to spend some time on that. But notice what it says. Moving on to our next one. It says, but ere longer, not too long from now, there will be such strife and confusion in the cities. Notice what it says, that those who wish to leave them will not be able. So there's going to be crises happening, and then they're saying, oh man, I have to leave the cities. And in some places, people that want to leave the cities will not be able. I was just reading in Jakarta that they're trying to do a lockdown. And so people it might not happen, they're just talking about it, but I know that in South Africa, they are locking up the borders, the large cities, people cannot leave. And so there will be people who say, I have to get out of the country, and it'll be too late for them. Too late.
We must be preparing for these issues. This is a light that has been given me. May God help you to receive these words that I have spoken. Again, talking about the quote in front of us where it talked about it's time for God's people to leave the city.
There is a preparation to do. We have to learn how to do country living. We have to learn how to grow our own food. And then when the death decree comes, then we will run to the mountains. Right now is not the time to run to the mountains and hide. Right now it's time to do country living and learning how to grow our food. Death decree comes, then we run to the mountains and hide, and then God will provide for us in a miracle. Mm-hmm. All right, so this is where we're at. We're going to be moving forward. Someone wants to know the name of the book again.
Sure, it's called Last Day Events. It's also, the shortened part of it is just LDE, and it's just one of Ellen White's books. If you just Google it, I'm sure you'll find it.
All right, so let's continue with our presentation. As the decree issued by various rulers of Christendom against commandment keepers shall withdraw the protection of the government and abandon them to those who desire their destruction. So here you have a death decree. Here is the death decree. They make this decree an issue. They pass it, and it's specifically against Sabbath keepers. Then the government says, we're not going to protect them. If they break Sunday, we're going to kill them. Now notice what she says. The people of God will flee from the cities, villages associated together in companies, dwelling in the most desolate and solitary places. Many will find refuge in strongholds of the mountains. There's that quote, great controversy. So you have different things. Look, the Bible says that a wise man can discern the time and the judgment. In Chronicles, it says that there was people that understood the things that Israel should be doing, the times that they were living in, and we should be like that. And many people run into the mountains and they come right back into the city. Many people talk about COVID-19 and say, hey, it's the 7 last plagues. They don't know what they're talking about. They don't know the signs. They don't know the times. They don't know what they should be doing. As God's people, we should know what time it is, what event, and what we should be doing, how to relate to these events. And this is what we're trying to do with these presentations. Look, for those people that are saying, a country home costs a lot of money. I mean, especially in Indonesia, here's a promise from Medical Missionary 310.
It's a great quote. God will, notice that this is a promise. God will help his people to find such homes outside the cities. Daniel, I just want to say a quick story. A few years ago, I was lay pastoring a church back in Minnesota. It was a small town. It was a town of 1,500 people. And we got an apartment complex that was literally right on the edge of town. We had a parking lot, and then there was a big cornfield. Wow. And it was just countryside right there. And we had people that were living in our building that had come from Chicago and moved up there. And I thought those people were intelligent. They understood that the cities were not a place to have your family. They moved to the small town. They had an opportunity to live very close to nature, yet still had some of the things of a little town, that's a good spot to start. A little town where you can still grow some things in your backyard and then learn and get yourself kind of acclimated to more rural living before you just throw yourself into a mountain.
That's right. And so God is intelligent. He does things progressively for the sake of his people. He leads them step by step, leave the large cities into small towns where you can be able to learn how to do country living that will prepare you for the time that will come that are going to be harder. Mm-hmm. And I want to share testimony about this, specifically this quote. I still remember it was about 10 years ago, Joshua. I was on my couch, I was reading a book, and I saw this quote, and I lived in Los Angeles. And I had just become a new Seventh-day Adventist, just recently learned that Miss White was a true prophet. I was very skeptical about Miss White. And I read this and I said, Lord, I want to move out of the city and I want to live in the country, but I have no money. And since that time, God has led me to live only in the country. And then I asked God, you said you will help me to find a home. Quick testimony that as I prayed this prayer, God, someone miraculously, by a miracle of God, gave me a house for free with 5 acres with trees and mountain, little hills, and there was a pond, had a well. God just miraculously provided for me. I was a college student. And I just claimed this promise. Now, I'm not saying that that's God's plan for you. Maybe you have money. Don't be cheap. But I'm saying that I had no money, and I was claiming the promise. I held on. I did not let go. I knew that God was going to provide, and God did provide.
Amen.
So I am a living testimony to this promise. So we're running short on time. We're over our time. We're going to go ahead and finish these up. So we're going to see how should we be relating to these things, these judgments, these things that are happening. What is God's plan? What is God trying to do in these things? Now, notice what it says. It says, in fires and floods and earthquakes, in the fury of the great deep, or that means the sea, in calamities by sea and land, the warning is given that God's Spirit will not always strive with men. In other words, these are just warnings. God is, as Satan is trying to deceive you and lead you into the Sunday law, God is doing something. He's warning you, get out of the cities. And number 2, he's saying, guys, my mercy will not last forever. I'm letting you know that I'm letting go of these winds of strife. I'm putting some sprinkles from my wrath from the vials of God and sprinkling on this earth. It is a warning. What is this? The next thing.
19 manuscript release that says God has a purpose in permitting these calamities to occur. They are one of his means of calling men and women to their senses.
And this is exactly what's going on right now.
People are waking up.
Many people are either calling me or texting me saying, something is happening. We have to get close to God. I have to change my life. Now, I want you to see there's 2 things. One, God is permitting these things. He's not doing it. He's allowing them to happen. Number 2, what I want you to know, I said that these are just birth pain. In other words, I personally believe that COVID-19 we're going to be over, and everybody will soon forget about God and go back. Another crisis will come, and again, back to sleep. Friends, I want to encourage you that as you know that this is just a birth pain, if God has woken you up through COVID-19, through the fires, through the floods, through the earthquakes that are happening right now, the tornadoes that are happening, that you stay awake, that you continue to make these things, because God is trying to wake you up and tell you, look, you have to realize what is going on. It's not going to last forever.
By unusual workings through nature, God will express to doubting human agencies that which he clearly reveals in his word.
So God is trying to wake people up, even sinners and also Christians. We have to get ready, friends.
Amen.
Now, I was thinking about a story that I read once. It was about a little boy. This businessman ended up having a child. And as he had this child, he held him in his arms, and he would soon have to leave on his business trip. And he would come back and go and come back and go. But when the child, around 3 or 4 years of age, he began to realize that daddy was leaving. And the child now thinking, I don't want daddy to leave. I'm beginning to miss my dad. The daddy was packing his suitcase, and the child began to notice that the daddy picked up his suitcase and was heading for the door. And the child said, Daddy, don't leave. And the daddy said, I'll come back. He said, no, Daddy, don't leave. He said, I will come back soon. And you know what? as this man was a wise man, he wanted to, how do I explain when I will come back? He doesn't understand months, he doesn't understand weeks and days or hours. So the daddy knelt down and he looked at the child's face and he said, son, look at the tree outside of the window. Outside of your window, you will see a tree. And he says, when you see the last leaf fall off that tree, know that I will be back. And the little boy would run every day to this window, and he would look at the tree, and the wind would blow and some leaves would fall off. And the next day, the same thing. And one morning he woke up, he ran to the window, and he saw there was one leaf left. And he got up and shouted, he said, Daddy is coming. And I believe that those leaves, that these winds of strife are blowing, and God is blowing these leaves, and we are close to that last leaf. Now, notice what it says here.
Testimonies to Ministers 4:4, paragraph 2 says, we hear now of earthquakes in diverse places, of fires, of tempests, of disasters by sea and land, of pestilence, which means contagious diseases, of famine. What weight do these signs have upon you?
Now here the prophet of God is saying, how much weight, what do these mean to you? What is it according to what you see that is going on in the world? What is it that they mean to you? Friends, and today I want to remind you that all these things are happening. These are just the signs of the times. All these things, COVID-19 will come and pass and go, and another thing will happen. I want to encourage you guys not to fall asleep, to know and remember that Daddy is coming. I want to take the time, I want to pray, and then we're going to a little time of question and answer as we're going to be closing. We're going to open it up to question and answer. Let us say a quick prayer. Father in heaven, as we see these things that are happening and approaching, we know that Satan has a plan, and we know that you have a plan. Father, we are asking you for your Holy Spirit. Guide us, wake us up, revive us. Help us, Father, not to follow our emotions with a high time and a low tide, but Lord, help us to really consecrate ourselves to you. I ask you that you give Pastor Joshua and myself wisdom as we answer some of these questions. We ask you that your people may be blessed and prepared to meet you. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, so here we have a question by one of our sisters. It says, how can we that still live in the cities prepare for country living?
All right, that's an excellent question. Now, the first thing I would do, just like Daniel did earlier in his life, he got down on his knees and he prayed earnestly. Now, you don't want to make rash moves. You don't want to just hear this presentation and close your computer and throw everyone in the car and start driving. You need to have a game plan. Depending on your work, there's a lot of people right now that are doing their work online. They're working remotely. So if you can work remotely from your home, you can start to look for another place to live that's going to be more rural. So you have to be just thinking about these things. If you need to report to work at a certain place, you can't be driving 5 hours one way. You need to be looking for a rural place that's in close proximity to it. I really encourage people to look at the small towns that are around the big cities. So not the suburbs, but go another ring out of the city where you're actually finding the small towns. That's where I would begin if I was living in a big city. I would really make it an earnest time of prayer, to just be seeking the Lord, asking him to open the way. And then the other thing that you can do is you can begin to start to just try growing some food, even in a little pots and things, Try growing some potatoes in a barrel, or get some carrot seeds with your children and, dig up a little spot in your grass in your backyard and plant some carrots or in some pots. These are the things that I'd start with. So first, number one, pray. Number two, look for ways that you can have employment outside of the major cities. Look for opportunities for rural places to live, like in the small towns that are outside the cities. And then the other thing is start to practice raising some food, even if it's just a tiny bit, like some potatoes in a barrel or some carrots in a pot.
I was going to say, I just talked to one of my family members and they were talking about country living and where should I go? What country should I leave to? And what places in the mountains, what property should I buy? And one of the things that I told them, look, you can know everything that's going to happen in prophecy, the chronology, you can know the events, when it's time to run to the mountains. But if your spiritual life isn't good, you can be running in the mountains and still be lost.
That's right.
You can be an organic farmer, you can be a hydroponic farmer, you can be a veganic farmer and still be lost. So one of the things I would start before making any rash moves, like Josh said, I would start with prayer, consecrating my life, and whatever you have, the Bible says, what your hand findeth to do it with your might. Amen. So I would start, if you have a little piece of land, start trying to live a little bit more natural, I would start looking for land. I think one thing that COVID-19 does prove is that we can work online.
Yeah.
And so, that is just a great blessing for many people. I can do my work online. I can live out in the countryside and do that. If you're not ready to move to something that like Josh, who is several acres and, his neighbor is about 4 kilometers or 5 kilometers away from him, you can start, like he said, in just a small town and then take the next step, take it step by step, start doing research on farming. I know that Josh shares books on organic farming and things that you can do at home. Just little things, understanding how the country setting is and what you can do.
Amen.
So it's a great question. Thank you for asking this. Anybody else have any questions before we close out this project? If you have any questions, now is the time to ask. But if there's no more questions, we can close it up. And in the meanwhile, as we're wrapping up these things or this program, I just want to let you know that we've gotten some pretty good feedback from the people that have been joining this care group. And we just let you know that we're going to continue this on a weekly basis. We're going to be bringing you more information. We do believe that we should be studying the book of Revelation. So one of the things that we're going to be doing is going to be doing the book of Revelation and end times.
Amen.
Now, next week, we're going to be talking about time prophecies, and also we're going to do another section on last day events. And we'll close that up and start with the book of Revelation.
I do just want to point out one resource that I think is really good. It was written by a gentleman that recently passed away named Jer Franklin. And his book is called You Can Survive. And if you just look at it on Amazon.com or something, I'm sure you can find the book. But it talks about the spiritual preparation for the times of the end. And it talks about the physical preparations. So like Daniel said, we need to have a relationship with the Lord. That's number one. Number two is we need to start making prayerful steps forward at the same time. And this book has good resources for that.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining. Once again, I hope that it was a blessing to you. If anybody wants that link, remember the link that we shared last week, the resources for natural remedies. Please send us your email. We've already sent it out. But if anybody missed it, you can send us your email and we'll send you the link to our Google Drive. We want to thank you once again for joining us. May God bless you. See you next time, next week at the same time. Okay, Sister Tabitha, we're going to need your email in order for us to send you the link. Thank you so much. God bless you all. You guys have a wonderful evening.